Well, welcome everyone, and good morning and welcome to our Careers in Art Market event. My name is Greg Perry. I'm the CEO of the Association for Art History, and this event is the first of the association's effort to let students know about careers that one can enter into from studying art history. Today, we're focusing on the commercial side of the art world, and we have a great lineup of speakers to talk about what they do and how they got there. From the auction sector, we have Tamsin who will give us insights on what it means to be a specialist in an auction house. And Toby will talk about how to best prepare yourself for a career in the auction world. From the commercial galleries, we have Bryan. She's going to talk about the operational side of running an art gallery. And Paula Sankoff will look at art galleries from a sales perspective. And finally, Elizabeth Dellert will talk about outreach to audiences, both from art fairs, which she has a background in, and at a unique place in London called Cromwell Place, where many galleries show their works. So I'm sure you'll enjoy learning about that. So each of our speakers are going to talk for up to 10 minutes, after which we'll have a good amount of time for your questions. We won't have breaks in between the speakers, but we'll have the questions after all have spoken. So do send your questions in using the Q&A function, and those will be taken and moderated by my colleague Alan Kirwan, and then I'll come back at the end of the program just to wrap up. So in addition to our speakers, I'd like to thank those who helped to organize this event. Alan, our head of programs, Mary Kate Cleary from the Sotheby's Institute, and Lawrence Hendra from the Philip Mould Gallery in London. So I'm going to now hand it over to Tamsin Golding-Yee, and we'll see you a bit later in the program.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much to Greg and Alan for organising this talk this morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be part of it, and particularly it being one of the first talks in a series exploring kind of working in auction houses, galleries, and the museum kind of art world. And so I think firstly, I'm going to just give an outline of my job and my day-to-day. And then I will go into more about how I got there and my particular journey and a bit about my background. And again, if there's anything I missed, I'm very happy to answer any additional questions at the end. So my job is, I'm an associate specialist in the Modern British department at Sotheby's in London. And as many of you know, Sotheby's alongside Christies are one of the biggest auction houses in the world, and they have main offices in London, Hong Kong, and New York, as well as many other smaller offices elsewhere. So it has a very global presence, and as part of that, there are lots of different specialist departments within Sotheby's. So this ranges from the Impressionist team, contemporary art, Islamic art, ancient art, Chinese art, and 19th century sculpture, for example. So it's kind of really everything under one roof, and it's a very kind of exciting and dynamic place to work. In each of the kind of the main sales sites, there are galleries that are open and free to the public, and almost every time I come into work, or if you came in to visit, there'll be something different on display. So it's really amazing to be around so many kind of beautiful works that both within my specialism and in so many fields that also I know nothing about. So Modern British is from 1900s until present day, and it also includes Irish art. And we work towards, so the Modern British team is based in London, and we have 4 sales a year that we work towards, so in March, June, September, and November. And we deal, so you may reckon some of our kind of headline artists include Henry Moore, Barbara Hepworth, Ben Nicholson, David Hockney, and Lucian Freud, for example. And my role involves helping with all these sales from start to finish, which is a really kind of exciting process, and it even though you're following kind of the same process for each cell, every single one brings so many different kinds of objects and so many different new situations and contexts. It keeps it very, very exciting. And so I'll just explain a little bit about kind of the cell process. So from the beginning, we're looking for works that we want to consign into our auctions. So to do this, we have people come in and show us their works in person. There's also an online platform that we review and get in touch with people if we believe their work would be suitable to include in an upcoming sale. And we, as a team, we provide estimates for any kind of email inquiries that we get for works that fall into the modern British category. And then after we've kind of collected and found enough works to include in our sales, I am really responsible for the cataloguing processes within the department. So this involves sitting in a basement in New Bond Street, and you're completely surrounded by paintings, sculptures, ceramics, all kinds of different medium works. And I find the signature, I find detail, like all the details of the work, I measure them all, and I write condition reports, which then is all uploaded to our website and forms the sale catalogue. And as part of this kind of cataloguing process, there's also the research. We look up what exhibitions the work may have been included in the past. We look up what books it might have been mentioned in or pictured in, and this all kind of adds more, more credibility and kind of desirability for the work. I also liaise with experts and states and make sure they're happy with how we've catalogued the work into our system. And again, it's that kind of that extra proof of authentication as well for the works. So after we've kind of catalogued everything, we then put the sale online. And at the moment, we have live sales which are held with an auctioneer in Bond Street, and we're also doing more and more online sales, which are really exciting and something that Sotheby's definitely been doing more of since the pandemic. And as part of this process, we often put works on view. So we help set up, I help curate and set up the exhibitions for the sale, and then comes the kind of the selling process. So we send out lots of kind of targeting emails to our clients and find people that we think might be interested in the works that we have coming up in this sale. And it's a really varied job. I love it for how kind of balanced it is and uses lots of different kind of skill sets. So there's the kind of the research side, there's the cataloguing and very kind of technical side to it. And there's a very kind of client-facing side as well. So consistently kind of meeting people at the valuations counter or speaking to people who've come in to look around the galleries. And I deal kind of every day with people on the phone and over email. So it really has a lot of good aspects of lots of different things that I enjoy. So yeah, I think I'll now just give a bit of a background to how I got there. So I studied history of art at Cambridge University, and I hadn't studied history of art at school, but I had done art A-level, and I think actually I was a bit worried about not studying it previously, but I found that kind of art and just kind of general interest in going to museums in my own time and doing my own reading was very, very helpful. And I think I grew up in Southeast London, and my parents kind of weren't from a particularly like art background, but I went to museums and exhibitions kind of growing up. So I think really my interest kind of really grew from that. And I think it was after my first year of studying history of art at university that I really started to realize that I wanted to take this into a career and continue doing this kind of beyond university. I think from people advising when I was there and from people I met kind of at talks, for example, I knew that it was quite a competitive field to kind of get into. Even if you'd studied art history at university, there are still lots of people like your colleagues, for example, who are really interested in working in auction houses or galleries. And it was my second year summer that actually I did my first internship at Christies in Singapore. And I don't have any particular affiliation to Singapore, but I had applied for a couple of internships at Christies and Sotheby, I think in London, and not heard back because I think they usually wait until people have graduated, for example. And yes, I just emailed the office manager at Christies in the Singapore office, and very luckily, after an interview, was able to go out there and do an internship in the Southeast Asian art and client strategy departments for 2 months, which was super exciting, a bit daunting as well, moving somewhere that I'd only been on holiday once before. But actually, my university were great. They gave me a kind of travel grant to help me go out, and it was also a paid internship, which I think there are quite a few kind of unpaid experiences going around, and but actually auction houses are really good with good pay kind of internships. So I think kind of after this experience, it was a really, really small team, and I got lots of exposure to cataloging and going on valuations and how the research processes worked. And I think from there on really knew that kind of my dream job would be to work in an auction house after graduating. I then did the Peggy Guggenheim internship in Venice after graduating from Cambridge, and then also applied for an internship in the Modern British department, so the department that I'm in now, straight after that I'd finished the Peggy Guggenheim. And that was a really amazing experience, and they're a great team and got me really involved with all kind of processes for sale, and they're all skills that I still use every day now, and it's something that I've definitely felt like I've built over time. I started there was the pandemic then, and I worked kind of for a small art advisory during that time. I then did an MA at the Courtauld in curating, which was definitely kind of more museum focused, but again, still using kind of the same research skills that I use in my job now. I then started the Christies graduate scheme program, where I sat in the contemporary art department and the Islamic art department. And then a role came up in my current role came up in a department that I had such an amazing time at as an intern. And that's kind of how I have, ended up where I am today. I'd just say, I think I've got a couple minutes left, but I think probably my main advice for people interested in working in specialist departments within auction houses would be to, I think, just apply for kind of every opportunity that you see, and don't feel like you might not check all the kind of criteria for those roles, for example. So even experience-wise, if it says kind of 1 year and you've only done kind of an internship or a couple of internships before, I would definitely recommend to still apply anyway. And I know that HR teams particularly, or specialists who work in the department, are very happy to be emailed and asked any questions about the application process or what exactly they're looking for. I'd also say that when applying for internships, don't just aim for the big kind of contemporary art and impressionist art departments. I think actually working in a smaller team, for example, for me being in Modern British, or when I was at Christie's working in the Islamic department, for example, can often give you much more exposure to the inner workings of behind the scenes of the sale. And I think it sometimes can give you more opportunity to do work such as cataloguing, which some interns might not get to do in their internships, but I think there's more chance that you might be able to do that in a smaller department. And I think that's really kind of critical experience to have if you then want to go on into the specialist route within a specialist department at an auction house. I'd also say kind of if you do get an internship, to really kind of make the most of it when you're there. Try and sit in any meeting that you can. Go for coffees with people, not just in your department, but further around the department in marketing or press, for example. There are so many different people doing different roles within an auction house, and I think definitely kind of make the most of that and be open-minded to kind of what roles there might be if there's not one that opens up in a specialist department. And then finally, I'd just say as well, even if I know that kind of the pandemic has changed the some opportunities, and perhaps some people here listening have felt that they've missed out on kind of a time where they could have done another internship, for example. But I think everyone's very understanding of that, and a lot of people also experienced it themselves. So I wouldn't worry about feeling like you have kind of a gap in your CV because of that. I think we're all super understanding, and as I said previously, Sotheby's are doing so many more kind of online sales, for example, and your experience as like a younger generation and kind of more used and grown up with more working online and doing Zoom meetings and everything else. I think you can really use those skill sets in a job going forward, and don't be afraid to kind of highlight and emphasize that, as it's something that I think most companies are really trying to work towards and just become more digital and online savvy. So yeah, there's kind of a way that you can use it in your favor, and keep going to exhibitions and galleries. And as I said, some of these galleries are open and free to all, and most likely if you're in Oxford Street, we will be open and there will be something on. Just come in, have a look round and have a read of a catalogue or a brochure. And yeah, I think definitely just try and get as involved as much as possible, even if it's not through kind of a direct internship or whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamsin. That was fantastic. Hello, everyone. My name is Paula Sankoff, and I am a Senior Director of Sales at Victoria Miro Gallery. I'm here to talk to you today about the roles and positions in a contemporary art gallery. So I first wanted to just start with a structure of a gallery based on one's experience when you first enter the gallery. It goes without saying, the commercial gallery, our role is to support artists, to provide a framework, a market, a place for them to show and exhibit their work. And from there, the sort of the key linchpin of a gallery is, of course, the founder and the director of the gallery, whose vision is what determines the entire course of the organization and what one can do for the artist in the roster, and also what the flavor is of a gallery. If you look across the board, you'll see a lot of contemporary galleries, you can often see strands within their program, a visual semblance among the different practices that are represented. So that again comes from the core vision, I'd say, of whoever is starting that gallery. From there, when you first walk into a gallery, your first point of contact will often be with someone sitting at a front desk. And that front of house role is a really key, crucial role. It's often a starting role for most people who want to enter into the commercial gallery sphere. You will be doing anything from kind of answering phones, greeting guests, getting deliveries, coordinating. I mean, it's usually a very busy role with the navigation of phones and deliveries and visitors, but often you'll help with other things, maybe events, maybe you'll be doing some calls, sending packages. It's an everything and everything role, anything and everything role. And you'll also be at a point where you will be seeing everyone who's coming into the gallery. You will be starting to identify maybe who are some key curators, who are some collectors that I should know, who are artists. So it's very much a front-facing, front of house role that requires you to act quickly on your feet, be able to determine what kind of call that is coming in and who should answer it, and what do I do if someone who needs to take that call isn't on the other side of the phone. So quick thinking and adept at handling many different things at once. But it's a great starting role. And having started very early on in my career, working Saturdays at a gallery doing that role, and also helping with different cataloging and provenance things as well, it was a fantastic learning moment for me. And it was a way to see how everything evolves. From there, from front of house, you then have your technical team. And I'm just going slightly geographically based on how our particular gallery is structured. And it's worth just noting that the gallery I work in is what's called probably a mid-sized gallery. If you're at a much smaller organization, you're going to have a lot of hybrid roles within that. With a technical team, your role is to do anything and everything regarding the actual artwork. So collections of works, condition reports, working on the shows, assembling the shows. I mean, our technical team and most technicians are incredibly adept and skilled at what they do. They have an innate awareness and understanding of how an artwork needs to be handled, installed on the wall, but also about an artistic practice and what's involved in that. And most major shows that you see at museums and galleries wouldn't happen if there wasn't the knowledge and the assistance of the technical team. So it's an incredibly valuable role. And often the technicians at galleries work interchangeably at times with museums, and themselves might have their own practice, which is what informs their own expertise in that area. But really key and really crucial, because questions about condition reporting, everything else comes up in the whole process. And for artists, it's a great, they're a great resource to bounce everything off of as well. From the technical team, there are, I'm just again slightly moving forward, thinking of artworks and how they would circulate in an art gallery as well as visitors. Our registrars work very closely on that side. A registrarial role is one that requires a great deal of detail. You also have to be able, again, to organize lots of different information, and they work with any movement of artworks in and out of the gallery, any cataloging, any insurance, storage, anything that is going in and out for an exhibition, be it at the gallery, in and out of the artist studio, the registrars handle. There's issues of import tax, there's issues of shipment, and all the logistics involved in shipping, crating, estimates, knowing who the shippers are, knowing what the process is. It's about sort of caretaking of an artwork. It's really looking after it, making sure it's delivered in good condition, and loan forms for external exhibitions, again, anything in and out of an artist studio. And you'll find a lot of registrars sometimes have worked at shipping companies, sometimes come from art history, because it's really about the care and maintenance and preservation of an artwork in its essence. And because you're coming from the ground, moving up, it's a lot of discussion with artists about how the work is in their studio, what condition it leaves. There's many different facets of that. And also, of course, between those departments, in terms of a more large scale installation, it's going to be about how it's put together. So there might be installation instructions, there might be a lot of nuanced conversations about how this work is going to enter the world. From there, there's the role of an archivist, and it depends where you are. Often sometimes it's one independent role. Sometimes it's a role that's combined into other roles, depending on the size of an organization. The archivist role is, again, care and preservation of artwork, but in terms of its perpetuity. So in terms of images, image clearance, images, taking photography, rights and reproduction, releasing images. If the press wants to, often there are key artworks that come up again and again and again. The artist has rights to those images. So you need to work with the image clearance on that, work with the artist for their permission, artist copyright. And also, of course, in-house photography and external as well. There's also a paper, but now also a digital, of course, archive of articles and publications that relate to an artist's work. So there's a lot of collating information in regards to that, knowing what's happening in the press, making sure everything's entered into an artist CV. And it's a way to learn. If you're ever looking for gallery jobs, it's a fantastic learning point is to start as an archivist, or again, to develop skill and become a really experienced archivist, because you are really getting into the heart of what the artistic practice is for those whose work you are showing. Communications is another key role. And I think it's worth saying that in my book, looking at the whole mapping of it, and for anyone who works at a gallery, all roles are equally important, because without them, it really is an ecosystem. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have such a terrific cohort of colleagues that I work with, because their opinions and feedback are valuable across the board for everyone involved in what we do. Communications involves the messaging, the press releases, the newsletter, social media, advertisements, any and all messaging relating to the artists and how their work again enters the world. You need to understand the ebb and flow of art world coverage. You need to develop relationships with press, and again, have a sense of what one's gallery and artists are doing and how it fits into the wider context. You might also work with publications, either internal publications or external publications. There's often a lot of legwork that galleries can help with if requested for different publications, maybe monographs, gathering of images, gathering of materials. So communications is such a key role. I can't stress that enough, as with all these other roles. Events, again, anything that a gallery might do, from a private view to a dinner to a cocktail. Events is another. You need to know how to manage guest lists. You need to have a sense of what a flow of an event might be like from start to finish. So more on that line, but often again, sometimes events are extant roles because of the level of events that a gallery might do. Sometimes they're embedded again with another aspect of a role. Guest list management, it's all very nuanced actually, and each one is a different skill set that is brought to the organization. Moving into exhibitions, again, this is the role that one would be involved with all artists, either with every single artist in a roster. You might split that up amongst colleagues, artist liaisons. You're talking to artists on a regular basis. You're finding out what they're up to, what they're doing in their studios, what they might be, sorry, that was my timer, what they might be working on, and how that might feed into museum exhibitions, how that might feed into working with curators on external shows, internal shows as well, and assessing what's going on with their practice. What things might your artists need? How can you create these contacts? How can you connect them with curators? And again, equally foster that contact back from other interests and what's going on a kind of curatorial and commercial presence. I have to move quickly because I'm afraid I'm running out of time. Sales, I'm happy to answer more questions, but essentially you're looking at how to place works by your artists in your roster, with key collectors and curators, and so both on a sort of private and institutional front. It's about finding out where interests lie, introducing work to these audiences, both through sales and sales inquiries and art fairs and exhibitions. You need to build a knowledge of your artist practice, of different artists that you might work with, for different artists you might work with, and an understanding of how that work and that market is situated in a wider context. And then lastly, I'll finish very quickly, there's finance, which is involved with everything on that side of things. Invoices, clearances, payments in and out, and then operations, which I think Amanda's going to talk more about, but that's a very brief overview, and I'm sorry that I have run slightly out of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A after. And good luck to everyone. I would just have to very quickly echo what Tamsin said, is try your best to get experience wherever you can, in whatever capacity, and just be very open to doing lots of different things. Good luck.
Thanks very much, Paula. Hi, my name's Toby. I work at Christies, and my role there is the global head of recruiting and staff engagement. but I'm here today to talk to you more broadly around skills and aptitude that's going to set you up for success in the art world. So what are we talking about here? Well, aptitude is an ability, innate or acquired, and the key word being acquired, capacity for something. And a skill is an ability to do an activity or job well, especially because you've practiced it. So I think the two key words there are acquired and practice. These are things that absolutely can be developed. They're within your gift. So I thought I'd flip this on its head and give you an employer's perspective of what we look for at entry level, and then that will give you an idea, I hope, of what to focus on. We're not looking for experience at that level. I mean, Tamsin touched on this earlier. Clearly, COVID has had a negative impact on people's ability to gain experience. But over and above that, and even pre-COVID, at that entry level, we're much more looking for actually an attitude. We're looking for someone who's got the right approach, who's got a can-do attitude. It's something that costs nothing, but can really differentiate you from the crowd. The other thing that we really look for is a thought process. So when we assess candidates, we're not looking to terrify them and put them under tons of pressure. We feel that actually, if you try and get people in a relaxed environment and being their true selves, that you'll really get to understand who they really are and how they think. And there's no right or wrong with this, but obviously, how's somebody approaching a problem, and do they ask good questions? So where do you actually start in terms of kind of careers into the art world? Obviously, when you're thinking of embarking on a career in this world, it can seem a very opaque place. At Christies, we focused an awful lot in recent years on trying to demystify the art world and to build some accessible pathways. So I'm going to touch on a couple of those pathways and then go into more detail about the kind of skills that I think you need. So obviously, I guess the most entry level experience that can be offered is work experience. So that's really designed to be a short taster of what it's like to work in an auction house. It's unpaid, but we cover the expenses that you incur, and it's kind of 2 to 4 weeks, and it's a great opportunity just to make that first connection and start to build a network within this world. The next would be apprenticeships. So this is probably personally speaking, my proudest achievement at Christies. Built out and introduced an apprenticeship program a few years ago aimed at A-level school leavers. And we're now taking about 40 of these every year in London across a whole range of different departments. And I think it's a great scheme because you can work, learn more about the art world, get a qualification outside of your day job, and also be paid and learn real practical skills in a role. The other that has been mentioned before is obviously internships. At Christies, these tend to be centred on art departments. They're very much graduate roles. They're 6 months long, to Tamsin point, obviously paid, so paid London living wage, and a really, really good opportunity to build your network and then be waiting in the wings for when longer term or permanent roles do arise. The other programme we have is a graduate trainee programme, slightly different from the internship in that it's rotational, so you're not aligned to one department for your entire time. So you get to see more of the business and hopefully understand holistically how the auction world works. And again, obviously a great launch pad. So kind of what happens, like where can that take you? I guess, you know, people are not necessarily that clear about how a career in the arts can look and how to prepare themselves for that career. A lot of people, I think, want a linear career path and want a really clear trajectory of where they're heading. The reality is in the art world that often it looks a little more like this, but this is not necessarily a bad thing. It leads to the accumulation of a rounded and varied skill set if you're jumping through lots of different areas of a business and different departments. And actually that's going to strengthen your profile and your skill set versus somebody who's been on a very linear path through one functional area of the business. So time spent in departments that may not be in line with your end goal is definitely not time wasted. So in terms of those kind of skills, my top, I guess, tips and tricks of things to focus on, And again, this is something that's already been mentioned, but network, network, network. There are so many opportunities in the art world to go to events. You know, there are lots of kind of more socially oriented events. There's lots of exhibitions that are free to attend. You know, go to as many of those as you can and push yourself outside of your comfort zone to speak to people and start conversations. The art world is ultimately a pretty small place, and if you attend enough of these events, you will meet really valuable contacts and good people who may be able to assist you in terms of your career search in the art world. So networking is definitely a skill that will pay dividends. Stating the obvious, this might sound a bit strange, but you know, don't assume people know what your ambitions are or what you're thinking. You need to tell them in a clear and concise manner. So I'll give you a really topical example. Right now, we are shortlisting for the graduate program at Christies. We get a ton of interest in that program, and the general level of applications in terms of quality is high. But you know, there are people coming from good universities applying to us who don't adapt their profile on their CV to say they're interested in art or interested in a role in the auction world. Or, you know, when you're coming to the end of the CV and they're talking about their personal interests, art features nowhere. And obviously we're making decisions against CVs on a hair's breadth because there are really strong candidates who have all the requisite academic skills. So, you know, stating the obvious and being clear about what your aims are is something that's so simple that so many people don't do. So in short, this skill is really about being a very clear communicator. The other tip I'd say is, you know, focus on your end goal. Don't be too caught up with your first or indeed your next step. And again, you've already heard this, I think, from the two previous panelists, but you know, get your foot in the door and then follow that zigzag path to where you want to get to. Don't be obsessed about what that first step is. So planning and setting goals are really kind of key skills to have. If you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. So I guess what's the common thread through all of this? Obviously, you're at the center of your career story. The art world is a small place, so you need to be really intentional and mindful about how you build and maintain your personal brand. Be kind and be helpful. It will be recognized and remembered, as indeed will the opposite types of behavior. In short, it's your reputation, right? What would people say about you behind your back at work if they're talking about you as an individual? And I would personally want to be known for being hardworking, with a good attitude and being a good colleague. And having that reputation or that personal brand is obviously going to stand you in good stead for applications that you may be making to take that next step in your career. So think about how you're going to differentiate yourself and position yourself and build your skills, knowledge, and your reputation. You've already heard this again, be flexible. It's really simple, but just be flexible and be open. Don't be too fixated and follow that zigzag path. Being resilient is something that you have to work at, but it's a skill you definitely need in the art world. There will be knockbacks along the way. Sometimes you may feel that you're not heading in the right direction towards your goals, but just stick the course and be determined. Don't give up, because when somebody else gives up, that kind of last bit of marginal discretionary effort that you put in versus somebody who's given up can literally be the pivotal moment in your career in the art world. So be determined and stick the course. Lastly, I put together a few links that I think are really helpful resources if you're looking to build out your network and skills in the art world. The first one there on the top left is a link, a QR code through to the Christies Early Careers pages, which talks a lot more about those programs I've already touched on. But it's not all about Christies. There's also a link there to Eric, which is a great app to talk about career journeys in the creative industries. It's recently launched and has some really good kind of content on there. On the right there, you've got a link to Christies Late. So talking about some of those kind of free events and networking opportunities, we throw open the doors of King Street on a monthly basis, themed around different sales or moments in the art world calendar. So an example this week just gone, it was around Chinese New Year, and a fantastic opportunity to come meet people, see amazing artworks and also other kind of cultural touch points. Really, really worth doing, and you'll get to meet some great people. Going on to the bottom row, we've got a link to Art History Link Up, which is a great charity that provide free art history courses and A-levels. In the middle there's Smart History, again a really good online resource for tons of courses and information on art history, all completely free and accessible. And lastly there you've got a link to Tate Youth. All of the major museums have an equivalent of this, but the Tate has a particularly good youth program, again providing tons of free access and free resources for people wanting to kind of get more involved and learn more about the art world. And all of these things combined can obviously help you differentiate yourself, build your skills, and make you a more attractive candidate when you are applying for roles in the art world. So that's it from me. Thanks for your time, and obviously look forward to answering any questions you may have in the Q&A later.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that, Toby. It was super interesting. My name is Amanda Bryan, and I work for Werner Gallery as the Director of Operations. I would like to kind of tell you a bit about my career path and how I came to work in this role and in this gallery. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from the UK. I am from Canada. And so basically, you know, I finished high school, had no idea what I wanted to do, and did the very traditional backpacking through Europe, and went to a museum and met a docent, and I was blown away by the knowledge and the connection between history and art. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So came home, asked people, talked to people, figured out that a degree in history of art is how I get there. So I looked into programs within Canada and moved on to do my bachelor's and my undergrad. And that's also where, again, I joined the art history unions. I talked to professors and was very inspired to eventually move to Europe. So through the program, I ended up working in museums, Art Gallery Greater Victoria and the Vancouver Art Gallery. And this is where I worked in varied roles. And so as previously was discussed by Paula, I did the visitor services, I did membership, I did finance. And all of these different roles showed me what I like about working in the arts and what I don't necessarily like about working in the arts. So after a few years of doing that, I realized that working in museums wasn't necessarily what I wanted to be doing anymore. And so I had a really wonderful mentor who was a curator there, and asked her about graduate programs. And she gave me a very good piece of advice. And she said, when you're choosing graduate programs, this will be your network. This will be your future cohort. These will be your colleagues in the future. And so I found that very helpful because it allowed me to think of, where do I see myself in the future? And it was in the commercial sector, and it was potentially at a commercial gallery. So I chose the Sotheby's Institute of Art, which was a very good program. But it was a very practical program, which allowed me to have connection to a bunch of professors who are working in the industry, art dealers, going to art fairs. Again, a much more commercial sector focus, which is what I wanted. So I was able to do that program. And then I finished the program, assuming I'd get a job immediately. That did not happen. Shockingly to myself, my experience in Canada did not translate very well to UK employers. So it was quite humbling, but as everybody's kind of already said, you have to get out there. So I went to every opening, I went to every networking event, and I also constantly told people I was looking for a job. So I think it's important to be out there, talk to your professors, and when they ask about it, you just tell them. And so I actually was visiting a professor at a reunion, and I told him that I was unemployed, and he was how I got into the gallery. So because they were looking for a gallery manager. So yes, I was able to get the job by somebody I knew, but once I was in the interview, that's where my varied experience came to help me, because I had bits of experience in accounting, I had bits of experience in visitor services, development, membership. So all of these things allowed me to translate that into a more varied role, like what I do with the Michael Werner Gallery. So a little bit about the role of Director of Operations. It's primarily overseeing multiple departments and the running of the gallery, and so managing the gallery from day to day. It's a very office-based job, and so it's very important to know that it's emailing, it's computer work, it's organizing contracts and services, cleaning schedules, but you're basically the liaison, I would say, between the junior team and the operational side, and then also the sales directors and the founding and the owners. So what that means is you have to be aware of budgets, finance, consignments, legal contracts, tax regulations, and also it's quite heavy, I would say, in HR. So you're responsible for creating job descriptions, hiring employees, and just kind of being able to be open and accessible, and being able to listen when it's needed and to manage a healthy, safe, and productive environment. It's a varied role. It requires being very flexible, very adaptable, but it's also, you're very much connected to the program of the gallery. Our exhibitions change every 6 weeks, for instance. So we have 5 shows a year, and so you're very connected with the artist, with the artist directly, because the gallery itself as well is a relatively small team. We're a team of 8 people. So it's not a role that I thought I would ever end up in, managing people or a gallery, but it is very interesting, and it changes constantly because the programs change constantly. What I would say in terms of the skills that would require this, it's somebody who has a very good attention to detail, who's flexible, who is able to listen, and is very adaptable. The other element of my job is I also do the back of house. So for instance, I prepare offers for the sales directors. I prepare invoicing. I understand the costs of the artworks and running the space. And I do that also sometimes at art fairs. So there is an element of travel that does happen on occasion, but it is also very important to make sure that the gallery itself is being run, and that is my base. Very quickly, I just wanted to kind of mirror what the other people have already said, but I think it's very important. Ask questions. Everybody, I believe, who's in the industry is open, and we would love to share what we've done, what we should have done, and to offer advice. I'd recommend volunteer as much as you can. If there's placements within your school program, take them if you're able to. Do try and have goals, but also be ready to change them if that does happen, because everything does change. And think about what you enjoy doing, and then experience a wide variety of roles in the galleries and pursue that. But again, I'm also very happy to answer any questions after this, and thank you very much.
Over to me then. I am entirely chuffed to bring up the end of such an illustrious crew of colleagues in the art world. As a bit of brief background to me, my name is Elizabeth Dellert. I am currently the Chief Business Development Officer at Cromwell Place. which I'll get onto in a minute. I feel a bit like I'm letting the side down because I'm not in a very artistic room. It's because Cromwell Place at the moment is completely chock full of art and public. So I've had to go in one of our meeting rooms. So basically, like everyone else here, and like Toby's zigzag path, I pretty much embody that. Likewise, I am from North Carolina. I read history and English literature at undergrad, but both of which I had placed out of a lot of courses using AP credits and stuff like that. So I had some extra space in my schedule. So I double majored in history of art. I did an exchange here at Oxford when I was between my sophomore and junior year at uni. But I remember when I finally declared my major at uni at the University of North Carolina, my mom had also gone to the same uni and she'd been to dental school. So when I told her I was reading history of art, she was like, what are you gonna do with that? How are you gonna eat? So I like to think I showed her. In any case, my trajectory has been a bit nuts too. So I moved here to get my master's after I finished university. I did the Christies education course. A lot of these guys on the panel have done the Sotheby's one. They're both brilliant. At the time that I did it, the Christies course was fully accredited by the University of Glasgow, which meant that I have an MPhil in the history of art and connoisseurship. At the time, I wanted to specialize in brown furniture because that was my great love growing up, still is. But the market, unfortunately, sort of shifted when I finished my course. And also, like these guys, I thought that if I'd done the Christies course, that would sort of get my foot in the door at Christies. And though it helped me build relationships and it put me in positions to meet people in and around the auction house and lots of different departments. It was really competitive, certainly the year that I graduated, and spaces just went really quickly, and you had to be sort of on the inside to hear what came around. So I then took my cataloging knowledge that I got at Christie's and then went to work for the Bridgman Art Library, which was brilliant because though I wasn't cataloging actual works of art, I was cataloging images of works of art. And the Bridgman Art Library, if you don't know, basically they license images for catalog raisonnés and in books and in newspapers and on tea towels, anything where an image of an art would need to be replicated. So from the Bridgman, I then went to work at Mallet, which was an art and antiques really, really old established firm, which was just opposite Sotheby's on Bond Street, where I did get back to my love of brown furniture, but I ran the picture department there as well. And I grew it along with some colleagues enough that we spun out and opened a wholly separate gallery space. And, I think all of this time, I was picking up lots of different skills, like these guys said, and being a gallery manager at Mallet was great because, as you say, I got to meet the clients. I got to understand and to work with them about what they need, what they want. Some of them were bringing pictures back to us to sell on, and it helped me sift out a lot of different roles. We hosted some events, we did art fairs. I went to New York and did a big exhibition. There was another branch of our business there, so it really let me test the waters. And what it did also illustrate to me was that I probably wasn't in love with the direct sales, but I was in love with the people. And I think through that zigzag journey, it really does help you hone and crystallize what's really important to you. And I think this was a shaping point for me because I realized I am an only child. I just collect people. And rather than I love the academic side of developing narratives about the artworks and to try and position them so that they can sell, basically marketing. I also really loved making sure that I could help match people up and build those connections with art. So after Mallet sort of sadly went into insolvency and it's no longer, but I was approached by some of the founders there to help them set up an art fair. And that was a steep learning curve. I had done art fairs, but I didn't know anything about getting planning permission in the UK, or building a tent, or writing a risk assessment, or any of those things. And because I was the first employee for Masterpiece London, which is sadly is a wonderful fair now that's been running for 12 years, I got to do a whole load of different things. And that's where I got to learn about marketing and operations and ticketing and, you know, every single aspect of running an art fair. And for me, the biggest important piece was the relationships with the galleries. So I did some selling of stands. And also it was important to me to sort of nurture this as a platform and to make sure that the galleries had the strongest, most elegant, most efficient, most seamless run platform from which to sell. Because hands up, basically what it means is that I'm one step removed from the actual selling of the art, and that's where I kind of like to be. And that I realized was important to me. So in any case, I was at Masterpiece for 4 or 5 years, and then I jumped laterally into art PR. I went to go work for an agency that did the PR for Masterpiece, so it kind of made sense. But then we won a lot of other large scale art event clients. So I worked with the Salon QP, which was a luxury watch event here at the Saatchi Gallery in London, and the Collect Art Fair, which is run by the Crafts Council. So I got into a lot of other different platforms of building partnerships and artistic collaborations, matching people up like Vacheron Constantin, big watch brand, with contemporary artists to do cool installations, and really understanding and reporting and evaluating those return on investments for my clients. So that was really very interesting to me. Then a job came up at Frieze Masters. They came and spoke to me about and asked whether I wanted to come back to art fairs. And I did. So I went and joined Frieze Masters Art Fair in 2015 and worked there for 4 years. And again, that brought back, you know, it put me in circulation with really beautiful museum quality art, some of which were brought by members of these panels. And it was really amazing for me to be part of such a globally established brand. That was the first time I had really worked with such scope. And at the time that I was at Frieze Masters, we also launched Frieze New York and Frieze LA. So I got to go to different places. I got to build relationships in different sectors. And for me, it was really amazing to be underpinned by such a strong product and a strong brand. Though I love the artwork as well, obviously, that's what sort of united us all. But it was great to be working with such a professional company that had 30 years established of really, really knowing their product and nailing it, knowing their brand proposition and how to translate it out globally. They've since taken the fair to Seoul. So it's all moved on rather a lot from there. But now I have shifted gears. I went to the Affordable Art Fair after that. And so I went to the whole different end of the sector, and I was the UK director there. But now I run a place called Cromwell Place that I am enormously proud of. We are utterly unique at the moment in the world. We are basically a Soho House meets WeWork for art. We've got 16 different gallery spaces that are available for temporary exhibition. They change over every week, which is basically like running an art fair every week. So there's a lot going on. And also we have climate controlled storage. We've got viewing rooms on site. We've got art handlers that live here that can help. So it's basically a place where you can just helicopter in with an exhibition, stage an exhibition, have everything you need on site, sell art, get marketed. I've got loads of partnerships going on. In fact, this afternoon, we've got a concert with the Philharmonia Orchestra who come in and do a monthly recital series with us. So it's a lot about narrative and storytelling and segmenting databases so that we can achieve our overarching goal, which is just to make sure that we get the right eyes in front of the right art under the right circumstances. So I think my specified topic, and I'm getting ready to go over time too, it was marketing. But sort of deviated from that slightly, but I didn't want to get too much into the data and metrics, but all of this that underpins my whole entire career. And what I think of is really interesting about art is making sure that you manipulate those circumstances such that, you know, people can fall in love with things. To me, it's a really emotional connection still. So if you can enrich that somehow by building collaborations with orchestras or performative dance or any other streams of shared interests like hands-on workshops or things like that. That's what we're really trying to build here as a hub, and to make sure that people, you know, have time to spend and get really integrated into what they love and how they can then take it home. So, you know, it is all about sales. Underlining, we are a commercial gallery space, but for me it's also a lot about love, and that really drives passion and people and you know, this entire market. And I hope none of us ever lose sight of that. But in any case, I think from my perspective, yeah, I'm definitely you know, roll with the punches kind of person. I definitely think that it does take perseverance and really knowing yourself and knowing what your passions are. And it doesn't have to be, you know, the art fairs, for instance, have such a raft of different types of people. It's relationship managers, it's salespeople, it's marketers, it's operations people, it's porters, it's data and metrics people, it's CRM managers, it's finance, as you say, with all of these other commercial galleries. It's a lot like that, but I think, you know, you can come in it tangentially, but it does take understanding what drives you and what keeps your passion going. So in any case, likewise, I've gone over time, but I'm always open to questions. Take care, guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. My name is Kirwan. I'm the head of programs at the Association for Art History, and I'd just like to come in at this point to take up the Q&A session. And so if I could ask our speakers just to reactivate their cameras so that I can put the questions to them that have come in from you all. The question you've all sent in an amazing array of questions, and I hope to get through as many as I can in the time we have available. And some are quite pointed to specific speakers, some are more generic. So I think we'll do it a mixture of that way. And actually, the first few questions, as would make sense, have come in for Tamsin. And Tamsin, Maria has asked specifically, should you highlight a specific department to work with while applying to an auction house, or leave the options a little bit more open? You did slightly touch on this, so there was a lot of interest around that when you mentioned that. And related to that, would you say then what are lesser known departments or roles would you say are overlooked, but actually are still as interesting to work in?
Yeah, sure. So usually when you apply for a position such as an internship, you have to wait for there to be kind of an opening that's posted on the company's website, for example. So usually you are applying directly to a department through the application process. And I think kind of following that, I would say just to kind of, yeah, if you have a department in mind, I think, and something comes up that's slightly outside of your interest so far, I'd still say that it was worth applying to and kind of doing the research around you know, the past sales that department's had, for example. And if you have a more kind of generic overall interest in how an auction house works, I think you can also bring that to a role that perhaps you might not know so much about. Again, kind of as Toby said, it's a lot about the attitude that you bring with that, and also kind of the enthusiasm and kind of what you're wanting to learn. And just kind of an example, I guess, about the different sorts of departments. When I first applied for the internship in the Modern British Art Department at Sotheby's, it was actually open for both Modern British and Victorian pictures. So at that time, the two departments sat together because of their kind of mutual covering of art made in the UK and Ireland around the turn of the 1900s, for example. So actually, when I came to have my first interview for that, I was asked whether I'd have preference for the Modern British department or the Victorian department. And I did express that Modern British would be my preference, but also that I was still just as enthusiastic to be sitting in the Victorian pictures as well. And even though I kind of knew less about the kind of more traditional Victorian pictures side, I think I still brought up that, you know, I'd seen these beautiful pre-Raphaelite works in Tate Britain, for example, and I think you still have to be so kind of open and prepared to be kind of put on the spot, or to be kind of adaptable when kind of the opportunity arises. And I think it's such a, you know, that opportunities that with the art world, as it's been mentioned before, like there's not just one straight path to get to a certain place. And your dream, you know, internship or role in your dream department might not come up for, you know, that year or even a couple of years' time, for example. So I think, being flexible towards that is something that is super important to go in to have kind of from the very beginning. And just kind of on departments in particular within auction houses, all the different departments are listed online on the website. So I definitely have a kind of a look through what all the kind of departments that are there. Make sure that they're based in London. If you're in London, for example, there are some, for example, like American art is only in New York and not in London. So just be aware of that. And I'd also say that there are departments that are non-specialist ones, such as marketing, press, kind of editorial, and they also offer internship programs, and they're still super involved kind of with the auction process. So again, even if it's not directly in a specialist department, I'd still encourage to apply to positions that are in those sorts of departments as well.
Great, thank you. The next one is quite open, but I think I'll bring it first to Toby, as I think it comes off the back of what he was talking about. It comes in from Izzy, and in particular, but there was a few other comments around this, so I've pulled it together. And the question really is, do you have any tips for how to set yourself, i.e. your CV or cover letter, apart from other candidates when applying for experiences or internships, especially if you don't have previous experience? What is that little nugget of gold dust that makes you stand out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, hopefully I covered a really obvious one in my segment, but it's amazing how many people don't actually put the really obvious stuff on their CV. So, you know, being really clear about what your messaging is there is obviously really important. And then coming to the point about obviously where perhaps you don't have a ton of experience or relevant experience, or, you know, maybe gained in another sector, then it's about being really careful in how you construct your CV and really kind of pulling out stuff that's relevant. The amount of CVs that I see that actually the individual clearly does have some relevant experience, but it's like the 10th bullet point on the description of whatever role that is they're doing. Why is that not the first bullet point? Like most recruiters, it's a horrible stat, and I think it's fair to say it's true and maybe even generous, is that, you know, they'll look at a CV for about 6 to 8 seconds before making a decision. So you really need to make sure that any and all relevant experience, even if it's just transferable rather than directly gained within a sector, is absolutely front and center and right at the top of the CV. So, you know, we unfortunately, just because of the sheer volume of interest we get, you know, we don't have the luxury of being able to really sit down with a cup of tea and read every single CV at length. So it's really, really important to be concise.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll open that out to the other panelists as well. Did anybody else want to chip in there, maybe on something, or has Toby more than adequately covered everything? Yeah. Okay, well, kind of keeping in this vein then with apprenticeships, and there a few questions came in on that. if one isn't successful at applying for an internship or work experience, as Toby gave, but it was relevant for all of your galleries and auction houses in a way, do you have any advice or suggestions on what to do next after that disappointment? How do people pick themselves up to go forward, I suppose? I'll leave that an open question to everybody.
I'm happy to pick up briefly and then hand over to anyone else. I think obviously a really important message, and you know, this again was mentioned earlier, and not by me, but you know, internships aren't the only route in, right? There are numerous routes in, and you know, just thinking about obviously at Christies, for example, you know, and somebody was definitely talking about the kind of front of house role, for example. That is something that, you know, we would hire for on a relatively regular basis, and it's a great path into the house. And then you can learn about working there, and then try and position yourself to jump into the art side of the business, or wherever it is you want to be. So it's not all about internships or apprenticeships or whatever. There are entry-level roles that kind of come up that can be a really, really good jumping off point. And then I guess, sorry, just to the second part of that, I guess, about the dusting yourself off, it just comes back to what I was talking about resilience. You've just got to kind of, you know, pull yourself up, start again, relook at your CV. Is there anything that you should be calling out or doing differently? And there's no two ways. It's not pleasant and it is tough, but if you are persistent and you're determined and you really, really just keep trying, you know, you will get somewhere in the end, even if there are numerous setbacks along the way.
I would say think outside the box. I mean, I definitely wanted an internship at an auction house too, but I think, you know, that the Affordable Art Fair, we had fair assistants every year, some of whom were techs, some of whom were just lovers of arts and enthusiasts, and they've ended up having, it's a great place to build relationships, especially at art fairs, because you've got a captive audience of usually about, you know, 100 different galleries under one roof, and it's an opportunity to make relationships with those people. And, you know, any number of things could be picked up after that. Obviously, those people are focused on selling art and they don't necessarily want to be flirted with or sold to. So understand the nuance there, but equally, you know, they are a raft of potential different experiences, whether you do want to go the gallery route or whether you want to go an operational route or an events route, or and usually those are paid as well at Affordable Art Fair and also at Frieze. The fair assistant roles are a really great way to get your foot in the door and to experience lots of different types of departments, including in the VIP department as well. So if it's a B2B or a B2C relationship that you're trying to navigate or understand, it's a great place to get some experience.
I would also add as well, don't give up, just keep trying. I'm sure we've all been there, but I certainly remember when I first graduated and I was applying to jobs, I sent out so many CVs. And also following on Amanda's comment about thinking outside of the box, even if your end goal is to end up at a commercial enterprise, look at all aspects of the art world. You might have an opportunity to get some volunteer experience working for an art magazine. I mean, a lot of the publications, they are desperate for anyone to help. And I'm just thinking not in publications, but all sorts of, it's a very organic industry. And I think we're very lucky. And in that respect, you're very lucky to be entering it at this moment in time. It's a lot less segmented than it's ever been. And there are so many areas of overlaps that you can explore. It's an ecosystem and it's an organism that's constantly changing, but you might gain some valuable experience in something that has nothing to do with a commercial sense, but would be very interesting to an employer. So again, think outside the box.
Great, and I'm very conscious amongst our audience today. We have a great mixture of A-level students. We have undergrads taking part in art history or different parts of the visual studies. And a question that came in from Urte, which is particularly to the A-level, I suppose, interest is, and maybe you've answered it some way, but it might be quite specific. For current A-level students, how would you recommend getting the experience needed for this area of auction houses and galleries? Is there something more specific that A-levels need to consider, because they're that little bit distinct and it's different from the undergrad maybe cohort who are listening in this morning? You know, who feels they want to take?
I mean, I'm happy to pick that up. I feel like I'm hogging the mic a bit, but I think obviously, look, for A-level, you know, that's exactly where we target our apprenticeship program, at people rolling off an A-level. So you don't need any experience to apply for that, and we're literally open to applications right now through to the end of February, for obviously apprentices that we hire in 2023. So, you know, you could literally just roll straight off an A-level and come into that program. If your path is to go to university and you're thinking about how to build a profile and experience to then obviously set you up for once you graduate, then obviously then it's kind of coming back to where I talked about work experience, for example. That's something you can slot in around your current studies, or indeed around your breaks when you're at university, to just try and get a taster and get those all important connections and really start building up your network. Because again, I think you've heard even just in some of the most recent answers that obviously it's all about thinking outside the box and building that network and being open to opportunities, which I think for me are the really clear kind of messages coming through from everyone.
Yeah. Amanda, yes, I have a question for you, but I think you have a comment as well. Yes, if you do your comment first.
Just kind of adding on to that, I think during the summer is a really good time for A-levels, and also invigilation. There's a lot of galleries and like art fairs and programs that need people for short periods of time, that you're basically in the space, you're front of house, you're the first contact, and you get access to a lot of different people in the galleries and museums during that period. So I think invigilation is a good, really good entry-level role for people to kind of get in the door.
And then Amanda, really kind of following on from that point, in your talk, you mentioned the importance of kind of front of house and that role. And Laura has, I think, a question is very much to you, is what would be your advice to someone looking to transition from front of house into maybe more specialized roles in galleries? That may be the entry point, but is there a way, I suppose, what's the career progression or how you would do that?
Absolutely. A lot of people, I think, that do reception or work, you know, at the front of house with the galleries will also get a lot of work from the different departments, specifically archiving, so like provenances, image manipulation, to the registrars as well. There's lots of database management that I think gets transferred to people that are working at reception. So I would show your interest. What are you more interested in? Are you interested in helping the sales directors? Are you interested in working on the historical provenance of the artworks? So I think that take what people give you, do it very well, and then give feedback and say, I really, really enjoy doing this. And I think that will just naturally kind of move you into those different departments.
Brilliant, thank you. David has sent in a really good question. I think it's open to everybody really, and his question is, what would be your advice as a panel for people who are not London based or with links to the London art world or centres of art, and they can't really, it's very difficult to support themselves to do weeks and months of unpaid work experience, particularly if they're involved in school or university programs. I think it's a very important question.
Yeah,
I had one quick response, and that would be just to get involved with anything you can that's local to where you are. It could be working on an exhibition at the place you're studying or university. Anything that is engaged with art from where you are is a good starting point, and will certainly, often when you're outside of the big centers, you can get, as a lot of people have spoken about, you can get even more experience within an organization. So start there first.
and just my 2 pennies worth. Obviously, look, there's no two ways that in the UK, London is the centre of the art world, right? That is where the greatest concentration of activity and institutions are. But there are obviously regional hubs, and, you know, to Paula's point, get involved with anything that's happening locally. And I think a really important message, kind of coming back to something Tamsin and myself mentioned, is obviously, you know, over recent years, there's been a lot of positive change in terms of the eradication of unpaid internships. I'm not saying there aren't still some out there absolutely are, but there's definitely been a lot of positive momentum, and, you know, people now paying for those internships which makes them slightly more accessible. But you know, I appreciate if you're living a long way away and you're traveling and or have got commitments, it's still a big ask. But absolutely, there, as I said, there are regional hubs, and just do what you can and get involved, especially with the recent Arts Council decision around funding, that obviously they're centering a lot of their funding outside of London. So that will hopefully follow through to more opportunities that come up in the course of next year or two.
Great. We're joined as well this morning. There's a lot of international students and researchers, young researchers with us, and a lot of questions have come in about, and I think maybe Tamsin, to bring you back in, and possibly Elizabeth in some sense, is maybe what are the opportunities? How difficult is it for international students to get involved in this sector? There's the issue around the visa, of course, and maybe Tamsin, it was coming on the back of your presentation. How do people in Southeast Asia make a career in the art market in the UK? So it is that idea of the hurdles if you are abroad but want to work in the sector here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's no kind of straightforward answer to that question, and as Toby mentioned, it's very much a kind of zigzag path where no person's journey is the same as another's. And I guess I think it helps if you have had an education here or you go to university in the UK. I think that's definitely kind of a big a stepping stone in order to kind of be over here. And I know that after your undergraduate, I think there are ways that you can stay working in the UK kind of after studying. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in London, so I don't know so much kind of about the visa side, for example. But what I will say is that, you know, we say the art world in the UK is small, but also probably overall in the world, it is not the biggest of industries. So there are lots of kind of links and connections. So say, like, for example, in Singapore, lots of galleries went out and were at, you know, the recent Art SG kind of the new art fair that happened like just a couple of weeks ago. There'll be people traveling out there. There are people in Hong Kong. I mean, working at, I think a lot of the companies here represented are quite international ones, and I am speaking with colleagues in New York and Hong Kong, you know, almost every day. And, you know, it's really, I think, having kind of experience from a different country or a different kind of art scene is really interesting, and I think it's really valuable. And again, using that kind of, you know, if you've got involved in your local kind of arts community or scene from where you grew up, for example, to bring that into your application for something like an entry position or an internship or a grad scheme, I think it will make you stand out. So I think that it's, you know, it may feel at times that it's a disadvantage, but actually it's something that I think you can really add to make you stand out, and, you know, create a narrative where you've to kind of explain how you've ended up where you've ended up and what you can bring to the table from those experiences outside the UK.
Alan, if I may, oh sorry, Elizabeth, you
no, go for it.
No, just because I deal with visas, it feels like all day every day. Just to give my perspective. Obviously in the UK post-Brexit, there is the post-study work visa, which allows you 2 years if you study at a UK institution to stay on, and there's no restrictions on your ability to work, which is positive. And then obviously at the end of that 2 years, there's the option to be sponsored by an employer or seek another type of visa. So there are routes in, and even for those that aren't in the UK right now, you know, we sponsor a lot of people to come into the UK via things like the BUNAC route, to come and do internships in London that you can stay for up to a year. So that there are routes, and, you know, they're not necessarily hugely expensive, unlike some of the previous visas that were in place. It's not perfect, but there are routes to stay and to come here if you're not already in London or in the UK.
And I would say there are ways to do it if you don't come from money. I mean, in our sector, sometimes you kind of feel like you have to have that leg up because you have to take unpaid internships or things like that. I know it's changed a lot since I'm a woman of a certain age, and it's changed a lot since I tried to do it. But it's you know, I do think that the visa thing was a challenge, but the Bridgman Art Library sponsored me for a work permit. I stayed there long enough that then I got indefinite leave to remain. So it wasn't too much of a challenge. I would say, coming from Southeast Asia, I was at Art SG, and what I didn't say about Cromwell Place is that our aspiration is that we are a members club, is our business model. So we are looking to go further afield, and there are other bodies like ours, like auction houses as well. But you know, Singapore is a fantastic market for us. We are looking at potentially doing a partnership or setting up another Cromwell Place there, so that our members can exhibit there and vice versa. So it's about those cultural bridges, and certainly within a free port. So Singapore has loads of opportunities to come this direction, and I think it's easier as well from a visa perspective, because Singapore it has a different visa situation, I think, with the UK. I'm not an expert, but there are ways to get through there. We've got Singaporean members at Cromwell Place, and a lot of Southeast Asian gallery members, actually. So it is a good foothold, and we are learning a lot more about Southeast Asian art in this country too. So it's definitely a market that's growing.
Great. And then just to kind of wrap up the questions before we finish out today's event, I'm going to combine two in one because they're both quite interesting. And the first one is, a lot of MA students and mature students have been asking that they're slightly wondering, is there a place for them to fit in at the moment? Because a lot of the discussion is about kind of guidance and opportunities for early career or students, maybe A-level coming out or undergrads. And they're wondering, is there advice for them that they don't seem to fit in anywhere? What would be your perspectives for that cohort of maybe students and researchers? And the second part of my question is not related to that, but after the pandemic, are there opportunities to work for your institutions remotely via online platforms, which is a new way of working? So kind of, I put two of the last questions to you as a combo.
I'm happy to take the one on remote working first, and then comment on the other question. Look, I think it's fair to say the art world, but let me stick to what I know best and say Christies was definitely pretty old-fashioned in their approach pre-pandemic in terms of flexible working and so on. It was very much expected that you'd be in the office 5 days a week. In fact, I remember our CEO at the time announcing with great fanfare in about 2018, I think it was, that we were introducing a new flexible working policy, which was 1 day a month from home, which is just laughable now. And post-pandemic, you know, we absolutely are adopting the hybrid model where there's an expectation you're in the office, you know, 2 to 3 days and the rest of the time at home. But obviously, as I've just said, there is that expectation to be in the office, you know, for some of the week. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of our population that are fully remote, and they tend to be in kind of tech-led type roles where they don't necessarily need to have any face time. Fundamentally, we're all working in an industry which is largely, although not entirely, around kind of the enjoyment and study and research and sale of physical objects, right? So you have to be in some kind of proximity to those objects to carry out your job role. So I guess long-winded answer, but in essence, not fully remotely, but there is a lot more flexibility than there used to be. And then the first question, if I'm understanding correctly, is that more around kind of career changes, like mid-career, so mature students moving across, or was it more just around people who'd gone on beyond BA to masters/PhD?
Yes, and wondering really whether there's the same level of opportunity for them to break into this sector as there's more kind of apprenticeships available for a younger cohort.
Yeah, well, obviously there's apprenticeships for the younger cohort coming straight from A-level, which I've already covered. If you're talking about kind of masters and PhD, I mean, we hire lots of people who have masters, obviously talking specifically about Christies here. I wouldn't be place to comment on the other organisations represented, but we hire lots of people with masters, but you don't need a master's. We hire plenty of people straight out of a BA. Then when you get to the PhD level, we find that actually once somebody is really going that far down a very, very specific or niche track, that obviously that tends to align more with roles in kind of institutions as opposed to the commercial art world. I'm talking generally, there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but if you're really going down that kind of PhD route, the chances are that you're going to end up more in a kind of institution where you get to sit with an object and pull it out and research the history for months and months on end, not the commercial art world where a work comes in, you research it, you catalogue it, you market it, and you sell it. It's much more kind of churn. That's my take.
Okay. Anybody else wanted to add to that, or?
I think with regards to, I think I agree very much with Toby with regards to the PhD element, but I've had many people apply with career changes in their life, with masters, and I think it comes down to experience and what they've done in their previous roles and what they want to do now. So I think there's definitely positions for people, mature students and master students. It just depends on what their focus is. So yeah.
Great. I think that point, Greg, I'll invite Greg, our CEO, just to join us to sum out the event.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you found it as interesting and insightful as I did, and thanks to all of our speakers, Toby, Tamsin, Paula, Elizabeth, Amanda, for joining us today. So much of this just resonated with my own career. I think that some of the takeaways that I got from this was how important networking is, to tell people what you want to do. I think that was also great advice. Go to all the free events that are out there, another good piece of advice. And then I think most importantly is just expect a sort of roundabout career. And I think that we've all, it seems like all the panelists have sort of had that as I have myself. My first position was as a gallery assistant. Amanda mentioned starting as an invigilator, and it was in a major museum, and I got to meet people in various other departments. It was very helpful. I was a picture researcher. I worked for a commercial gallery. I worked for an art appraiser before having a 25-year career in the museum field. Clearly, I was 12 when I started that. So it really mirrors what people have been saying, and just, be creative, be flexible, tell people what you want to do, and get yourself in front of them. And I think this is really helpful because I know when I was a young person who was interested in art, I had no idea about what the art market was. Maybe I had some idea about what a museum was, but the art market, I think it was completely opaque to me. So I think this is really helpful, and we'll be looking to do more events and programs around the art market, because it is such a rich field, and there's so many opportunities in it, and we really do want to focus on that. So do look at this space. We have the contact information from people who attended this event. We'll certainly be letting you know about things we'll be doing in the future, maybe as early as May, and a couple of other programs this year. So watch out for those from the Association for Art History. And again, thank you all of you for joining us, and to our speakers and to Alan today. Have a good day, and thanks again.